Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss the state of agriculture resilience with Mars and Anchor Ingredients. The need for food system resilience has become crystal clear. With ingredient prices rising, climate events becoming more frequent, and supply chains lacking stability, leaders are being asked to put more time, effort, and innovation into ensuring business continuity despite the effects of climate change. You're all familiar with our need to reach climate goals, secure supply chains, and build a more resilient system. That's why you're here. So, let's talk about some of the best ways to do that, given our current business landscape and with insights from leaders who are already deep in this work. We've put some thought around some of the best ways to build resilience and have compiled them into a report called The State of Agriculture Resilience. In our discussion today, we'll share the top line findings from our report, and we'll dive deeper into the challenges and opportunities in this space with Mars and Anchor Ingredients. We'll also leave some time for live questions. Let's start with the state of ag resilience. Regro recently surveyed 21 leading companies in the ag and food sectors. Their insights, along with some of our own data, helped us build a picture of where we are today in our collective journey to resilience and to provide some key focus areas for companies in 2025. Before we dive in, I'd like to clarify that this report, as with our work, is focused on using regenerative agriculture and regenerative programs as a method for building resilience. So, if resilience is the what, our ultimate goal, regenerative ag is the how. But of course, regenerative agriculture isn't the solution to the problem, it's more like an open door. So, let's explore this space a bit through our findings from the report. First, our climate is no longer a looming threat, it's a current issue. More than 70% of companies we surveyed are already experiencing the impacts of climate related volatility in their supply chains. The global data supports this too. The global cost of climate change reached $143 billion in 2023, which is equivalent to $16 million every hour. We're paying the price for our inaction in businesses across multiple sectors and around the world. Those are losses we should be working to mitigate. But in order to mitigate them, we need to quantify them and map the connection between climate events and business success. For example, recently, Unilever's supply regions were hit with droughts that led to 40% in shortages and yield loss. Unilever has strong regenerative programs that have built resilient farms over time, so they were spared much of the financial implications here. But had they been sourcing from conventional farms, they would have had to pay significantly more to keep their supply chain running smoothly. Unilever's savings from regenerative practices can actually be quantified as ROI for regenerative agriculture, which leads us to our next finding. The best way to build resilience is to build a strong business case for it. In our survey, 25% of companies identified challenges in proving ROI as the most significant hurdle to driving investment in regenerative ag programs. Let's start quantifying the real ROI of regenerative ag, going beyond program outcomes to understand stability in procurement, brand uplift, and the cost of inaction, or the $143 billion cost we mentioned earlier. But let's dive a little bit deeper into calculating ROI. We've seen examples of this in our own customers, from Unilever mitigating price volatility to Cargill expanding its business with low impact ingredients. Another example is Kellanova's regenerative program, which led to increased shelf space in Walmart and can be quantified as brand uplift. It's essential that we start quantifying this ROI so we can understand the scope of our impact and build a stronger business case for resilience. Third, collaboration is essential, but there's not a right or a wrong way to do it. Effective companies build partnerships within organizations across the supply chain and at a landscape level, that is, with other partners who work on or source from the same regions. In our survey, we found that nearly 70% of organizations reported sharing ownership of sustainability initiatives across at least two departments, and 80% are working with supply chain and customer partners as external collaborators. It's time we look outside our typical networks and start building creative partnerships. We heard this especially at our Agriculture Resilience Summit last year. One of our guests from Bartlett said that the number one moment where resilience really struck him was when Bartlett's biggest customer said, "We need this for our business." That's a powerful starting point for a partnership. And of course, you'll hear a lot more about building unique and evolving partnerships in our discussion with Mars and Anchor Ingredients. Finally, policy progress is important, but we can't wait around for it. Our survey showed us that policy and regulatory action is the second most significant driver of corporate climate action. We need to build programs and frameworks that are scalable, adaptable, and ready to meet the needs of global regulations when they're enacted, and that drives a lot of what companies are doing today. But the lagging of policy is difficult. I'm sure many of us have been in the position where we're waiting on regulatory guidance, say an update on GHGP's land sector removals guidance, only to get a notification saying that it's been postponed yet again. LSRG has been postponed for over a year, and this is on par with some of the other regulations we've seen in this space. But in the meantime, we're continuing to see the impact of climate on our businesses. We're running out of runway to wait for guidance. So the TLDR here is that we can build the runway for policy and regulation, and we should. All right, let's recap. Given our learnings from leaders in this space, if you want to build more resilience this year, you'll focus on these 4 areas: quantifying the impact of climate change on our food supply, building a clear ROI for your company to invest in resilience, getting creative in how you build partnerships, and preempting policy change. Now, this was a very quick overview of our findings, but you can find more information about each of these in our report, which is available on our website. There's a button to download it right on the homepage, but we'll send a link after the webinar too. Now, let's hear from leaders in this space and how they've encountered these learnings on their own and their advice for others looking to evolve in the next year. I'm pleased to introduce Adam Hardie, Al Yablonski, and Sarah Beth Anders. Adam is the Climate and Sustainable Sourcing Regional Lead at Mars. He leads the effort to design and execute a sustainable sourcing strategy for the region while delivering on Mars' Sustainable in a Generation plan. Al is the CEO and co-founder of Anchor Ingredients, a leading premium ingredient supplier for the food and pet food industries. Since co-founding the company 10 years ago, Al has led Anchor's expansion efforts in becoming a partner known for delivering quality, transparency, and innovation. Sarah Beth is Regrow's Chief Commercial Officer at Regrow. She's focused her professional life on helping companies develop categories and lead them. She's passionate about regenerative agriculture and scaling change and impact. In her role as CCO, she manages our customer partnerships, customer success, and marketing. SB, I'll hand the mic over to you for a chat with Adam and Al about their own journey to resilience.
Thanks, Eleni. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great week and morning. As we learned in the State of Ag Resilience paper that Eleni just walked us through, partnerships were one of the main themes that we saw both within organizations and across the supply chain. And of course, at our own Agriculture Resilience Summit in the fall, we heard this as one of the main themes as well. And so we thought we would bring together 2 organizations who have built a very strong partnership to talk about how you can scale the impacts of programs and accelerate regenerative practice adoption while offering more benefits to your own business and partners and accessing new markets and having more stability in sourcing. So in many ways, Anchor and Mars have been the gold standard and are really helping to pave the way for others in agriculture and CPG. And they've really showed us how supply chain collaboration truly benefits both stakeholders across the whole supply chain. So without further ado, Adam, this first question is for you. Let's talk about the nature of the partnership between Anchor and Mars. What is Mars looking for in its partners, specifically procurement partners, through the lens of sustainability?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I sit in our procurement function in Mars Pet Nutrition. And so our relationship with our suppliers, merchandisers is usually kind of the first step. And I think really in that the key piece is willingness. To be able to see that willingness from our suppliers to engage in that first conversation is step 1 And then from there, it's really like how serious are they going to take this? And again, where we've seen such a great response from Al and his teams is investing in their own organization, right? Bringing true professionals to the forefront that work on this, that we meet with regularly and consistently. And, nothing against the merchandisers of any of our suppliers and nothing against our sourcing managers, but we sit aside of that. I don't buy any of the widgets that go into our products. And some of the folks that we get to work with aren't selling any of the widgets that go into our products. And so we get to work solely and exclusively on the sustainability mission. So that's pretty serious. So that's my biggest one for sure, is the willingness.
Oops, sorry about that. I should mention too that the floor is open to questions, so please use the Q&A button and ask away. We will get to your questions. We have plenty of time. I'll shoot the same question over to you. What are your priorities when establishing partnerships with CPGs like Mars and others, and how do you think about working with these partners on long-term sustainability programs?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, you need to think of Anchor as that highway that connects the grower to the food manufacturers. We simply connect those two links. We have processing assets that are able to, process the ingredient in whatever form or format that food manufacturer may need. But we're simply that highway that connects the two. And we're talking with all of your leading CPG manufacturers, and sustainability is obviously topic 1A on almost every single conversation that we're having. What invigorated our team and got us excited about the partnership with Mars was, similar to what Adam said, was this willingness, but not only was a willingness to engage, but had clear direction on an outcome that they were looking for. Because sustainability is continually evolving, the direction in which brands want to take their sustainability initiatives runs the full spectrum. And so when Adam and team were able to come in and give us clear direction on what outcomes they were looking for, it made our job a lot easier and made our job of communicating that message downstream to the grower base a lot more efficient.
Got it. What were the some of the initial goals for the partnership, and what led you to choose a regenerative agriculture program as a means of meeting your goals and the outcomes that you were mentioning? Did you have to compromise in any of those goals or adjust the working relationship to start working on those goals? I guess, why don't we lay out the path to partnership and kind of the key moments that got you there?
Yeah, I can go first, Adam. I think the two main points that we had to compromise or get alignment on was data collection. So how are we going to do the data collection? And then ultimately was the financial incentive. And so how are we going to entice the growers to participate in the programs? Anchor was willing to make the sacrifice to, we view sustainability as core to our mission here, and we believe that it is the future of ingredient supply chain. So we were willing to take a long-term approach, and we were willing to partner for the long term to strengthen the relationship with Mars. But the growers, want results and they want immediate information, and so collaborating, aligning on the data collection and the incentive structure were probably the two most important for us.
Yeah, I think to back up and kind of give the Mars perspective, regenerative agriculture and climate smart agriculture are just key to our greenhouse gas strategy. And again, as a privately owned company that is still held by the family, this concept of sustainable in a generation is kind of the nickname given to our global Mars Inc. sustainability plan. But it really is the sincere approach by leaders in our organization that incremental improvement each and every year is what we expect. And really, I think that's the mission is just start, right? You can't get incremental improvement unless you start. And so going from 0 to 1 with some of the kind of key pieces that Al mentioned was a huge success, right? And it took, me getting up to Fargo and kind of saying, Al, I think we could probably pull this off. Molly, I think we could probably pull this off. And here's how we might do it. And it took another year after that, right? And we had more homework to go back and do on our side. And then, like Al said, we were able to bring something together, and that was much clearer than where we started. But I think the other piece to this is that recognizing that incremental change, it will be that, right? Just given the nature of this business that we're in regenerative agriculture, you're not going to get it right off the bat. And whether it's incentives to the farms, whether it's data collection, whether it's interaction with farms, education with the farms, you have to be listening that entire time to obviously the farms first and foremost, but also the suppliers, right? It is Al and his teammates that are going out in the field and kind of pitching this program to farmers that they source from. And so they have to believe in it first and foremost, and then be well equipped to be able to, explain what we're trying to do. So I think it's kind of those iterative processes that really get you to the point of launch. And then once you launch, it's listen and adapt and keep renovating.
Yeah, and set realistic goals. I mean, what was easy from the start is we both had alignment on what the North Star was. But I think, through collaboration and conversation and just working more together, we were able to set realistic goals and identify what we wanted to accomplish year one, year two, year three, all the while getting us closer to that common North Star that we were all shooting for.
And what were some of those iterations that you had to make? I mean, I'm sure you had a hypothesis going into it and then probably had to make some changes as the partnership started to take off. So what were some of those iterations or mistakes that you might have made that you course corrected on?
This is a regrow webinar, and it's being recorded, so I'll mind my words a little bit, but I'll also be candid and honest. One of the biggest decisions, and Al kind of mentioned it, was choosing an MRV partner. That was a big deal, right? And again, where we found such great help and support, and guidance when it came to a lot of these very nuanced pieces of carbon accounting, and data collection that are just, you can really screw up fast if you don't have a good partner in that space. And so I think that was one that, again, we've brought in essentially Regrow as the kind of third leg of the stool here to really have these pieces take steps forward. No, I'm not being paid to say that. That is a very sincere thing. And so I think that's very important, because when we set out on the original design of the program, it's not what we ended up with a year later. And again, that's because we had these iterative steps and meeting with the anchor team, meeting with the regrow team, tracking what, GHGP was going through, what land sector removal guidance was going through, talking about removals, and the risk on discounting removals. Those are the types of conversations that we've continued to have, that kind of continue to, again, we trust in the core principles of the program. But as we evolve, those pieces have to kind of come in at a rate that, they're essentially available.
Yeah. And the other stakeholder that you have to listen to is the grower themselves. And I think Mars had an understanding and tolerance to be able to receive that feedback and course correct, because when we're sitting in the conference room designing the program with the assistance of Rego, it can sound great to our respective teams, but then when we are bringing that message down to the farm level, we had to course correct and we had to adjust the program on the fly so that we could get the adoption that we both wanted.
And Al, that's super interesting. How do you bring some of those insights and surface them to Adam, for instance?
It was collaborative. So Adam and his team participated in a number of events with us. So they would do the farm visits with us. They would participate in the grower events so that the farmers and growers could hear directly from the brand themselves, which was a critical component to the success.
Yeah, it sounds like a best practice moving forward, and obviously something that really helps set up the program. We have a live question, so I'll pivot a little bit and then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled questions that I have prepared. How did you go about vetting your MRV partner? What would you say now looking back was key to know that the partner was right for both Anchor, Mars, and the grower, obviously the most critical stakeholder? Thank you for asking it also.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of our perspective. We are agnostic as Mars because we work in so many different regions on so many different commodities. We have to be agnostic, which makes the internal accounting very challenging and very exciting. We have a lot of people that work very, very hard on that. And so I think what we were able to kind of share with Anchor and team was like, listen, these are the folks that we've worked with before, that we've had good experiences with, that are staying, right in line with kind of this evolving science and evolving nature. But at the end of the day, we really passed it to Al and team, and I'll shut up and let you kind of polish it off.
Yeah, I mean, I think we ultimately interviewed 3 or 4 different MRV partners before we ultimately selected Regrow. Probably the number one reason was ease of use and an understanding of the business. Regrow did a really good job of diving deep into what the desired outcome was and how their solution could provide the results and the data that we ultimately needed. And an ability to customize. Just, I guess, the theme of this is it's a continuous evolution, and Regrow was willing to kind of continue to evolve and customize their product to meet our collective kind of goals.
Great. A question that I often get asked is, and I think you guys can probably answer this from a very different lens, obviously, is how do you build a business case for regenerative agriculture? How do you engage? Obviously, Adam, this is for you. How do you engage stakeholders across your organization? How do you demonstrate the potential impact of the partnership? And I think another question that I get asked often is like, how do you show success to continue the investment and to get more investment in it?
Yeah, excellent questions, because that's very difficult. And I'll promise to be humble. It is not on my shoulders that this Mars Pet Nutrition North America ecosystem just received me into the business, and everything was rainbows and unicorns from then on out. Tremendous support from some super senior leadership. This was something, quite frankly, that the pet care organization globally had not really sunk their teeth into until about 3 years ago. And myself and quite a few other colleagues kind of came to the pet care organization that really started to bring traction, credibility, and kind of that regional deployment of these types of programs. And so again, we kind of had that super senior leadership, very bought in, very convinced. To answer the second part of how do you show the progress, get them out. Every time you're interacting with your senior leaders, it is, when do you want to go out to the farm? When do you want to go see this in action? Because if you're not pitching that, you're missing. You're absolutely missing. And again, we have the relationship with a group like Anchor. Make sure it's not during harvest or planting season, and you'll be all right. They'll support that. So I think you have to be able to get folks out to see it in action, to see that dollar you spent on this program came up with this piece of machinery or this practice or that plant growing in that field right there is because of us, like because of this partnership. And I think that's where you can really bring it home for a lot of folks. I find, honestly, get your lawyers, get your regulatory people out there. It's those types of folks that are very uncomfortable with this space and need to be more comfortable. And you can be the best storyteller in the world. You can have a PhD in this, and it won't be you that convinces them that this is real. It'll be the farmers out there actually deploying those practices. So that's my encouragement. I'd say the other piece too, pictures and movies. We all are burdened by these horrible black boxes that live in our pockets. You have to take pictures, you have to take videos every single time you're out in the field, so that you can just bring that back. And it's just a constant drumbeat into our business, right? It's not what every single time one member of our team is out somewhere, the pictures come back, the videos come back, and it's, hey, look at this interseeder going across the field. Isn't that neat? That's what our dollar got us. So it's those types of pieces that those are easy practices that anybody could do.
That's super tangible, Adam, which I think is what the attendees are looking for. So you said 3 things. You said getting executive buy-in with senior leadership. getting them on the farm and seeing it in real life, and then pictures, movies, and like creating the constant drumbeat. How often are you sending updates to senior leadership? What does it look like? What's the cadence?
Every chance I get. There's some expression about squeaky wheels and grease, I think. You have to be. And again, if you work in a sizable organization, to be able to be present and visible in the organization can sometimes be tricky because we all end up neck deep in Excel spreadsheets, sorting through whether it be budgeting, whether it be results, and trying to, rationalize those results to your inventory, right? Like we all understand that day job. Nobody really cares about that work from a senior leadership perspective, right? Like that's the thankless work that just has to happen. They want the tidbit to tell their manager, maybe it's your president, maybe it's the, beyond them, the good work that you're doing. And when you have a tangible asset like a picture with a little, blurb in the picture, a meme, I think the kids call it these days, that's exactly the type of material you need to be spinning up. So I'd say as often as possible without being annoying, is absolutely the cadence.
But I think that helps not only internally within Mars, but that helps with the adoption at the grower level. When Adam and his team bring 7 to 10 people to a grower event and is able to build relationships and, talk to these people and then be able to show them the videos and the imagery and the results, ultimately it makes it feel real to these growers and it makes them want to participate because they ultimately know where their product is headed and why it's going that way.
Great. Awesome. Super helpful. Adam, this is another live from the chat. This just in. How, if at all, do these efforts to your internal partners like marketing and product development, consumers, and what is the objective of that messaging for those different audiences? And how do you make this topic that can be quite technical relatable? So I think to our earlier question of cadence, how do you alter the message to your cross-functional partners? And how do you make it applicable to them?
Yeah, I will not say that I have mastered this because it's quite easy to get quite technical quite fast. I think finding common ground, and not to use some farming pun there, but to find that common analogy that someone can understand and communicate what you're trying to do in the field. Something as simple as a cover crop, right? Like everybody knows what an empty lot looks like in suburbia, right? Everybody understands what I'm talking about. Everybody understands what a beautiful lawn in suburbia looks like. Like 80% of our business that has never been to a farm understands that analogy, understand when I say that's a cover crop that we're trying to establish, people's minds just go, oh, you just want to plant a grass out there? And you're like, yes, that is exactly what we're trying to do here. And that's as simple as it needs to be. So I think you can just find these kind of cute analogies, be a little creative. The other piece, and obviously this is just my personality, is be enthusiastic, right? Like if you're doom and gloom and not thrilled that you're making these pieces of progress and you don't present this stuff with a little enthusiasm, people don't get excited about that. You do have to sell this. You have to constantly be pushing it. So I'd say that's the other one. If you're comfortable with that, and if that's your language, then I'd say go for it.
That's great. Um, What is the state of regenerative agriculture today? What it's considered table stakes in the industries, and what are the remaining challenges or opportunities to overcome? This feels like a very loaded question. We could probably have our own webinar specifically about challenges, but let's keep this one brief, but giving your top line insights.
Al, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, sure. I, I would say there is not a common goal here or a unified message kind of from the CPGs and the food manufacturers are out there. I'd say at its core, there has to be a level of traceability down to the farm field. Like that is a table stakes that is required and a fragmented supply chain ultimately cannot deliver a sustainability solution that a brand is able to utilize. And that's where, Anchor has spent a bunch of time and energy and money building a scalable traceability platform, which allows us to be able to offer a regenerative program to somebody like Mars. So then ultimately where that program goes, that's up to the brand, that's up to Mars. And that's, our job as an ingredient supplier to be able to provide the data, the insight, but ultimately, give that information to the brand themselves to do with it as they please, whether that's an absolute claim or whether that's just potentially some sort of sourcing claim, whether it's a specific origin or a specific field in which a product was grown. Everybody's looking for something different. And so that customization aspect is really important.
I think I'd take, obviously sitting from this desk, the perspective I see out there is that exactly the way Al said, it's a very fragmented approach out there, right? You've got 9 different ways to reward a farmer financially for these, from federal grants, private, dollar per acre, dollar per outcome, pay for the piece of equipment, pay for the seed, reimburse, pay up front, in every iteration they're under. And so the financial scenario just has to be clear, right? Like I haven't seen one that rules the roost. And I think as long as it is a clear value proposition to the farmer, first and foremost, then things can actually happen. I'd say the piece that I see out there that's woefully understaffed, and this is I think it was the Regrow Summit 2 years ago, that the discussion around regenerative agronomy is absolutely a shortcoming out there, and everybody knows it, everybody feels it. There's just not enough folks that have had, kind of a little more sincere agronomy education in this space. I kind of wrote it back to like, learning dairy nutrition in college. Dairy nutrition in 2008 is not what dairy nutrition is today in 2025, right? Like it just is outdated. And so you essentially have to relearn the things you learned 17 years ago. And I think that seems to be a common occurrence. There are wonderful agronomists out there. Please don't get me wrong. We need you all, and we need more of you. But it's just kind of this next touch of how do we fine tune the recommendations into farms so that we don't screw it up. It sounds a little coarse, but you really only get a few shots with a farmer before you're not welcome back on the farm. And so if their experience with a cover crop per se, it was like planting, I have an example, and sorry, not an agronomist. So it was like planting rye as a cover crop coming before corn. And in a allelopathic effect, they had horrible corn yields. They fired the agronomist, and I was like, what a horrible example of like not good agronomic advice. And that farmer said they would never plant cover crops again. 10,000 acre farmer, not small, will never plant cover crops again. That's a miss. We should all be pretty disappointed in a result like that, right? We let the farmer down in that scenario. And so I think that's where I see a big need.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an important point to call out about the collaboration partnership. Not only did we have to bring in the right MRB partner, we brought in the right regenerative agronomist, to participate in those events, to be able to give credibility and actionable steps to the respective growers. And I think it's important for the group to understand, when we talk to the growers, there's really 3 different buckets of growers. There's the growers that are already adopting these practices and are willing participants. We want that bucket to continue to grow. It's a pretty small bucket today. You have the other bucket that are people that are just adamantly against it, and you're never going to convince them otherwise. And then the bucket that we're really focused on are those ones that are curious, the ones that are curious about, what it means, how it can impact their farm, how it can impact their respective end markets for the products that they're growing. And so, when you kind of start to narrow your focus, understand which segment of the grower base that you're focusing on, it's a critical aspect to being able to build scalability within your program.
Good. Okay, let's get back to brass tacks a little bit. What was the model for co-investment? Who handles each part of the program?
Yeah, I'll maybe kind of start, and then Al, you can kind of drive it home maybe. So the way we approached this program was kind of threefold. A grower grant process, so the financial incentive for the growers, the MRV piece, and the regenerative agriculture agronomic advice. And so Mars dollar goes towards all of those in this particular program that we're discussing. And so that's kind of how we as Mars bring our dollar to the table. Now, some of those are shared with Anchor. And again, Anchor has, well, maybe I'll just let the guy at Anchor say it. What resources they've brought. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first it's the team. You have to put the right resources. You have to educate your procurement teams. You have to have dedicated resources on staff that are committed to this, the right technology platform, which was a collaborative decision between us and Mars so that we could deliver actionable data that Mars could ultimately utilize in this. But I would say largely our contribution is probably human resources related and that grower relationship. How do you get to that grower? How do you communicate to that grower? So that's us putting on grower events. That's our procurement teams getting in the trucks, getting out, educating these growers on a one-on-one basis so that we can increase the rate of adoption for that. Anchor has also chosen proactively to just start to financially incentivize growers by participating in these programs, whether or not that cost is passed through to a Mars. We want to get the growers to understand that there is, impact for the results that they're delivering. And so, in our grower settlement checks, they'll actually see a sustainability premium that is paid for those that are willing to participate and do the data collection aspect. But to your point, like you have to have a long-term approach, and you're not going to see direct, ROI on these dollars for a long time. For Anchor, it's about continuing to build strategic partnerships with our core customers. And so we are taking a very long-term approach with this. We understand we're going to have to invest significant dollars, but ultimately that's going to build to a much longer, stickier relationship with companies like Mars in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Adam, this one's for you that came in. Are there other metrics outside of carbon intensity that Mars considers when defining a resilient supply chain? If so, are these developed internally or is there like a go-to benchmarking organization?
Oh, that is a great question, and it is a really difficult one. No, carbon is not it. I think there's actually quite a bit of risk in being carbon myopic and overly focused on carbon as the only key KPI, because that doesn't really drive, carbon alone does not drive improved soil health, does not improve better crop resiliency, that doesn't improve farmer resiliency, that doesn't actually improve the resiliency of our food system, right? A holistic set of KPIs is kind of the gold standard, right? So yes, carbon, yes, soil health metrics, yes, biodiversity metrics in and around the fields. Yes, decreased inputs is part of this process. We should not be robbing farmers of the tools that they have available to them. I think when we think about decreased inputs, I'm more thinking about the profitability scenario for a farmer. If they're able to learn a different technique or kind of bring a new idea to their farm that allows for less passes on the field per year, that's time in the seat, that's fuel burned, that is money and time back in their pocket and their day that, that's a great KPI that is not tracked very well. And so I think, water is the other one that's glaring us all in the face. I live in the state of Colorado, and if you've ever been to Colorado, you understand that water is a very hot topic all the time. And I think it's not just the arid states of the West anymore that are seeing this. I think you're seeing droughts, you're seeing floods in places that shouldn't flood. You're seeing, droughts that shouldn't happen. You're seeing snowstorms happen, this time of year in places that are driving up, total precipitation per year. I think those are the challenges that are looming us in the face that, again, these KPIs could sort of attain. I think the problem that we have is you start to get too focused on too many KPIs without even starting the program. And so that is my biggest encouragement is like, don't get hung up on figuring out which carbon metric, which biodiversity metric, which water metric you're gonna hang your hat on and what your goal is going to be. You shouldn't be even thinking about a goal yet. You don't even know where your current status is, I would wager. And so just start the program, start bringing in the data to establish your baseline on some of those KPIs. And then, again, depending on if it's tied to a specific brand or if it's kind of to your CPG's goals, drive down towards that KPI set and drive, action towards that KPI set. The others will follow, right? Like if you're having a holistic program, driving the right pieces forward, all the KPIs will follow.
Yeah, and I guess like any project, defining them early at the very beginning and managing towards those. So another one that we get all the time that I wanted to make sure we asked here, and actually I think someone asked something similar, is how do you guys think about the ROI of regenerative agriculture programs? Is it about the return on investment on the program specifically? Do you guys think about it a little more broadly? Some of the things we hear about ROI is like brand lift, more stability in sourcing, less volatility on pricing, and the potential cost of inaction. But how do you all think about ROI and what's the context in which you think about it?
I can go first. I think my answer is probably a little bit easier than Adam's. Is ours is more holistically. Ours is all based on investing in the relationship with the customer. And so for us to be able to calculate an ROI on a specific investment or a specific, sustainability initiative is very difficult. We're making the bet that ultimately those dollars help strengthen the relationship with our core customers, which in turn hopefully means additional business into the future.
I think from our perspective, it's table stakes. And it's table stakes not for the time that, quite frankly, some of us will be in our positions in these large food companies. It's table stakes for my children. It's table stakes for that next generation. And so listen, if you're trying to talk to your CFO and convince them to spend millions of dollars on a regen ag program, and you're like, it'll pay for itself in 3 years, I'd be a little more cautious there. I think, again, when we look at what we want to achieve is we want to still be here as Mars Pet Care 100 years from now, 200 years from now. How do we actually start to build out the pieces of the puzzle so that is real? Because there's quite a legacy behind us, and it's the legacy going forward that's our focus. So maybe you might think that's a little bit of a woo-woo answer, but it really is the philosophy and the credo here. So I think
Yeah,
that's the mission.
I can double click on that, Adam. Like, I mean, we talk to every large CPG manufacturer out there, and everybody is talking about it. So I think you're absolutely accurate that it will become table stakes. And I think there's a tremendous first market advantage for those that are willing to adopt because it does take time. And so I would reiterate again what you said, Adam. Just get started. By getting started, you don't have to set specific carbon reduction goals. Like by doing a sustainability plan, you can start to make very simple origin claims. You can make very simple sourcing claims, and then you can start to make your carbon claims. So you can start to see potential impacts or action items at the brand level a lot sooner than maybe you'd be able to see a carbon goal, which helps your quality assurance teams, which helps your marketing teams, helps your regulatory, your procurement, and your sustainability teams. And so, my big message is everybody's talking about it. Very few are actually doing it, and everybody's going to be doing it. So get started, start developing your program. It's an evolution, and you just need to make sure you have the right partners with you.
Yeah, the partnership piece seems like the name of the game today and at Summit and all the conferences that we're attending. At what point does this become standard business versus food companies continuing to pay for practices or outcomes? If the work is regenerative, eventually the producer should be financially in better shape. Are we planning for that in the future? How do you all think about it?
Uh,
Crickets,
I'll
crickets.
give my, or go ahead. I can give my perspective. I think there has to be some financial incentive to the grower to get adoption, and get people talking and get people to start delivering or implementing into the actions. The success of regenerative agriculture is better yields, lower inputs, better results. And so over time, I think by building the right programs at the grower level, yes, it might take some incentive to get them on board, but over time, it's our belief that those incentives potentially will be replaced through just increased yield and better performance at the farm level. And so I think by working collaboratively, having the right brand, the right suppliers with the right growers, ultimately this can become a win-win-win for everybody, as these practices start to get implemented at the farm level.
I think my experience has been in two different spaces. Obviously we're talking kind of row crop, small grains in this situation, but coming from the world of dairy, been at this for call it 7 years now. And we used to think that the total ROI scenario for, a generic modeled farm in the field was about 5 years. And I think the reality of that is a little bit more like it's +3 -2 +2 -1 +3. So it takes maybe 10 years to arrive at the place you said you were going to, the model said you were going to be at 5 years. And I think that's pretty reflective when we talk about something like premiums or grant programs or that financial incentive piece. Are we already planning for it? I don't think we've been able to get to a scale yet of adoption across our portfolio. Not to say that we're not trying, right? Like we're out there, our suppliers, we've got wonderful suppliers engaged across nearly all of our grains. And yet it just takes time to spool up that excitement in your organization, to have the financial resources to put towards this effort and scale. And so, the clock is kind of starting now, it almost feels like, after a few years of working on this for Mars Pet Care North America. So I think there's, we have to be a little cautious to say any time frame is when the premium should dissipate or disappear, because it's just going to be very uniquely different depending on, if you're working with animals, if you're in row crops, if you're in the northern part of the US, in Canada, or compared to the Southeast. There's just so many things that can happen. And then, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. There's so many different things that can happen that it can derail that progress.
How are you guys thinking about the next phase of the program, based on some of the learnings that you shared?
Yeah, feedback, farmer feedback. So, again, we're not like 5 years at this program, right? This is only a few years old. And so I think the level of listening that we have to get done this year in particular is really what's going to set our trajectory for 26 to 30. And I think that's really pretty sincere. And I hope people understand that, we don't have it all sorted here yet. But again, by listening to our suppliers, listening to the growers, listening to agronomists out there, that's how you start to evolve the program, evolve the right, financial scenarios, agronomic advising scenarios, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would agree. Just again, going back to that alignment on that North Star, but how you're ultimately going to get there is going to evolve. And so, I appreciate that about Adam and his team. They've been extremely receptive to the feedback that we've been able to deliver. And I think over the course of the last few years of this relationship, this program has looked a lot different.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we have another one from the chat, and we probably only have time for a couple more, so submit your questions. But it's super engaged, so thank you for that to the audience. For sourcing claims, do you extrapolate at the product level? For example, percentage of wheat in this product was regeneratively grown. If so, how do you track and link the regeneratively grown acres to the raw material or to the final product?
Al, would you actually put your take on this first, and then I'll go?
Sure. I mean, we utilize separate item SKUs, and so identity preservation is critical into this process. And, Anchor, again, think of us as that highway, like a lot of ingredient suppliers are. but we are able to directly link from a specific farm field to the delivery point or the food manufacturer. We're able to do that and document that and do it in a scalable format through technology solutions that we've developed. So it's all about identity preservation and providing that visibility and traceability of that supply chain so that the brand themselves can make whatever sourcing claim that they may have. And that's what really kind of opens the kimono for these brands is once they have that visibility and traceability of that supply chain, all of a sudden the world of options for them to be able to make on sourcing claims is a lot more than a spec sheet or a certificate of analysis. And then it's up to, the respective brands and the marketing organizations to do with it as they please.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, it's a challenge, right? Mars is a very cautious business when it comes to any marketing claims. And again, where we utilize, we don't buy things for the brands. We don't buy ingredients specific for the brands. We buy things for our network. And so it makes some of those claims very, very difficult to do. And again, where we have worked very hard. So it's funny. I don't know if this question is from kind of like a marketing person in a CPG or a procurement person. But I would say my biggest caution out there is the number of claims that sail out that are somewhat poorly supported is astounding. And the number of those claims that end up getting rescinded or just ignored through time is astounding. And I think that's a disservice to the consumer, first and foremost. That's who we're all trying to work for here. And again, at the end of the day, it's a disservice to the growers, to the farmers that are actually putting this food on our plates. So I would say claims don't always equal sales, and claims are extremely finicky with something like weather, mycotoxin events. Think about marketing. I can't get a marketing person to stay in the role for more than 2 years. So it's like, the next person group comes in, they want a different claim. Well, all of a sudden you've just doubled your risk because you have two claims on top of each other. So I would just err on the side of caution, have a very pragmatic approach that's well founded in science and your sourcing strategies, and that's long term, right? Like that's the biggest piece here.
Yeah. And that's why I think most of what you see in the marketplace today is what we would call more generic claims. And I think as these programs continue to evolve, we'll be able to narrow in that scope even further.
I think this next question is one that we're all thinking about. So thank you for the participant who asked it. With the recent changes to government programs and reductions in USDA funding and staffing, how do you see this impacting the future of regenerative agriculture?
Oof. That's a tough one. With a lot of grant systems frozen at the moment and the hope of unfreezing a lot of those grant systems, I am hopeful that will go that way, but that's a hope. It's a big challenge. I think in the last few years, there's a lot of groups across the industry that worked very hard to get something like climate smart commodities stood up. And that brought a lot of exciting development and progress to this space. And I think it's a nervous one. I think everybody's kind of waiting to see how that falls. Do I have the crystal ball to say how that will affect adoption rates across the Midwest in corn ground? I don't. I certainly do not. So I'm again hopeful that private entities and businesses can continue to kind of create that incentive structure for farms. Farms see the long-term benefit of adopting these programs, and we'll kind of keep at it here regardless of federal funding.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we need to show the growers that there's a reason behind this and get them to do it on their own and be proactive towards it. But we totally recognize there's a lot of headwinds facing CPGs today, just with inflation. We tried to reduce the cost of raw materials, and now you have kind of the regulatory environment and stuff. But at the same time, I think everyone probably participating on this call is a believer that this will become the norm. And so knowing that it's a long-term approach, you just got to continue to dredge through the waters and continue to make the necessary investments to get to that end goal.
Great. Okay. If you had one piece or a couple pieces of advice for those looking to build supply chain partnerships for regen programs, what would it be? What do you want people to take away from all of this?
I can go first. I mean, I'd say be willing or prepared to invest time, be willing to spend time with your partners, have a tolerance for change, knowing that this is a continual evolution. You need to dedicate resources internally to make sure that you have subject matter experts on staff who can, work collaboratively with your partners. Don't expect it to be perfect the first time. And just, be excited to participate. I like what you said, Adam. You have to have a level of enthusiasm about this. And, I think if we can continue to drive momentum at this brand level and a supplier level, we can get that down to the grower level, which is going to increase adoption across the board.
Sounds funny, but be like a farmer. I can't say it any other way. They just seem to put on their boots and start the day, no matter what the weather is, no matter what prices are. They just seem to put on their boots and walk out the door and start their day. That's it. Just start. And then from there, it's go and do it again, go and do it again. Be resilient in yourself and in the work that you do. Because it will take, I'm sure, all the folks in all the different categories and suppliers and, all the input folks that are probably listening, like it takes all of us to make this work. Not one solution will solve the problem. So I think, again, a holistic approach is the must. So start, maintain a holistic approach, recognize that, one component won't solve all your problems, and keep at it.
It's a good way to end it. And I'll put my boots on by the door and channel my inner farmer. Thank you both so much for your time. I felt like I had, I learned a lot today. I'd also like to share some of my own learnings from Eleni and the report and what we heard today. So the first thing is building partnerships and calculating ROI are two of the biggest challenges we saw across the board in the state of ag resilience. It's also what I hear with the role that I get to play every day at Regrow is we get asked all the time, how do I calculate ROI? How do I build the business case? So it's not really surprising that it's tough for us to navigate, but we also know that ironing out those details will be immensely helpful in the long term. We need to build a stronger business case. This can be from small pilot projects to larger scale programs. It doesn't have to be as defined as Adam and Al's program, although it's great that they have launched such a robust program. Identifying that airtight model for co-investment and outcome sharing reporting is essential. It really lays that foundation for a strong partnership and quantifies progress towards the goal. We heard Adam talk a lot today about ironing out what those early metrics are and reporting back to those early and often to stakeholders. And then that strong partnership exists at the supply chain level, at the landscape level, and within our own business. It's the only thing we cannot do if we hope to build system-wide resilience is we cannot work in silos. We have to work together. And so having that shared landscape is ultimately the thing that will propel us forward in 2025 and in the future. So, Eleni, I think you have some quick housekeeping, and then we'll let everyone go.
Yeah, thank you. With that, I'll bring our discussion to a close. Thank you all for joining us to explore the state of ag resilience and to hear firsthand advice from leaders in the space. As I mentioned at the top of this webinar, we're all here because we recognize that a more resilient system is better for business and for the planet. And hopefully the tools that were shared today will help you build resilience across your own value chain and your businesses. Tomorrow, we'll send all registrants a link to the webinar recording, as well as an access link for our report, but you can download the report anytime on our website. Thank you to Adam, Al, and SB. Thank you, Adam and Al, for joining us and lending your time and insights. And SB, thanks for hosting a thoughtful discussion. If you're interested in talking to our team about regenerative programs or building resilience, you can send us an email. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week.